Good. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And members, so we're back on this original amendment, which again would simply direct the HHSC, the Health and Human Services Commission, to request a waiver to join 31 other states and draw down federal funds that we are entitled to under the Affordable Care Act to increase access to affordable health care. And this would ensure up to an estimated 1.1 million Texans who remain uninsured. And again, I think it's important to note that these are American citizens who, if they lived in other states that had taken advantage of the Affordable Care Act, they would have health insurance. But because they live in Texas and because our legislature has not yet acted, they do not have that right. And this is our ability to direct the Commission to request a waiver to begin drawing down those billions of dollars that we would benefit from.
Mr. Wood-Estee, for what purpose?
Does the Speaker yield?
Speaker yield?
Yes.
I yield.
I yield.
Representative Turner, how many Texans right now are we going that are going without health insurance?
Representative Uresti, it's estimated that currently 17% of Texans are still uninsured, which is, even though that number has gotten better under the marketplace component of the Affordable Care Act, it's still the highest rate in the nation and it's still the highest number of uninsured in the nation.
So of that percentage, how many of those are minorities, would you say, roughly?
I'm not advised on the precise percentage, but I think it is fair to say it is a majority.
It's fair to say that would be in the lower income brackets, correct?
Absolutely.
So initially, we'd be helping families throughout across the state of Texas.
Well, that's exactly right. But it is important to note, however, that a lot of these individuals who would benefit are working folks, and they simply don't have access to health insurance through other means. So there are a lot of people out there working hard, support their families day in, day out, but don't have health care. Doing this, drawing down these federal dollars under the Affordable Care Act, would give them a chance to have access to health care.
So the families that are working for small businesses that aren't able to supply major insurance companies such as USAA, what have you, they'll be able to go out and get this insurance, correct?
Well, that's exactly right.
Okay. Well, I thank you for your service, sir. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Representative.
Ms. Howard, for what purpose?
Would the gentleman yield?
Gentleman yield?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Turner. So I'm trying to understand here. We have made a decision in this state not to expand Medicaid, and yet there are some things that have changed. Why is it that you think at this point in time that we may have more of the will of the House to do something like this? What is it that we can expect that would be different now that would make this more palatable?
Well, I think there's several things that are different. I think that since we last talked about this issue, we've had a presidential election. We have a new president. And just a couple weeks ago in the United States Congress, there was a big effort to pass a repeal bill of the Affordable Care Act, and that effort failed. And don't take my word for it, but U.S. House Speaker Paul Ryan declared less than 2 weeks ago, Obamacare is the law of the land. And he doesn't expect that to change anytime soon. It seems like the new president's kind of given up on this and moved on to other things. So, and I think that's why we're seeing in other states that are conservative states and have Republican-controlled legislatures are moving to expand Medicaid under the Affordable Care Act. Last week, Kansas, on a bipartisan basis, voted to do so. Their governor did veto that bill, but it passed a Republican legislature. North Carolina, evidently, is considering the same. And again, 31 other states have done this, and many of them with Republican governors and Republican legislatures, because those folks understand that these are their tax dollars, and why wouldn't they take advantage of drawing those down to help people in their state strengthen health care, make their communities healthier, and bring jobs and economic development.
So would it be fair to say that for several years now we have decided not to take those federal dollars, not to bring the dollars back to Texas that Texans have paid in their federal income tax? We haven't brought it back to help pay for health care, which has increased our premiums, increased local property taxes to help pay for uncompensated care. But that now, because of the change in the administration, I think, would it be fair to say that some might see, as you point out with these other red states, that the fiscally responsible thing to do is to bring those dollars back to their states, assuming that they're not going to have the same kind of so-called strings attached, that there may be more flexibility now, as you mentioned in here, that we have opportunities for flexibility, that we could use these dollars in our state to address, as you point out, the highest rate and the highest number of uninsured in the nation, that this is something that's a fiscally responsible thing to do.
Oh, I think that's exactly right, Representative Howard, and I think it's fiscally irresponsible for us to not do it. We have lost already tens of billions of dollars by not having done this yet over the last 4 years that we could have done it, and we don't need to wait any longer. And, you know, I think we've had a presidential election. President Obama's retired. He's no longer president. You know, I hope that takes some of the politics out of it, and people can do what's right for Texas outside of the partisan nature that's surrounded this debate for so many years. Because ultimately, this is about bringing Texans' tax dollars back home to Texas to create jobs, to provide more health insurance, drive down health care costs across the board for all of us, and reduce pressure on local property taxes.
And isn't it correct we've been relying on the 1115 waiver to try to address some of these concerns, but that expires December of 2017, and we don't have any assurance at this point that that waiver will be extended?
That's exactly right. And I hope it is extended, but we have no assurances at this point. I think there's a lot of uncertainty right now in what the new administration in Washington is going to do. But what is certain right now, as Speaker Paul Ryan said, this is still the law of the land. Why don't we take advantage of this law and bring our tax dollars back home?
Well, thanks very much. It's a great amendment.
Thank you, Representative Howard.
Ms. Hinojosa, for what purpose?
Will the gentleman yield?
Gentleman yield?
Yes.
He yields.
Mr. Turner, I appreciate you educating us on this issue. I need a little more education, please. You mentioned that things have changed since this body last heard this amendment. And you said one of the big changes has been a change in the presidency. Why would that matter in this case?
Yeah. Well, I think that, unfortunately, like a lot of things, this issue just got consumed by partisan politics over the last several years. And, you know, it's a new administration in Washington. Not one I'm supported, and I'm not happy about it, but it's a fact. And the truth is, we have the ability as a state to work with the new administration to bring down our tax dollars under the law that Paul Ryan and others say is the law of the land for the foreseeable future. And I think that's why we see 31 other states have already done this. Other states are moving to do it now. And I think we ought to join the club and bring our tax dollars back home to Texas.
Do we think that the Trump administration would require us to spend these dollars on, say, Planned Parenthood?
No, I don't.
No, and it's my understanding that that was one of the types of objections that existed before about this money.
Probably was, but I can't imagine that would be the case here.
I thought I heard you say that this could yield billions of dollars in new money for Texas, but certainly I misheard. You meant millions, did you not?
No, I meant billions with a B.
You meant billions
with a B. It's estimated to be around $10 billion per year.
Well, I'd love to keep talking to you about this, but I have to go call my sons and wish them good night. Thank you,
better
Mr.
you better
Turner.
do that. That's far more important. Thank you, Representative Hinojosa. Move adoption.
Chair recognizes Ms. Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Members, this is Medicaid expansion, so I'm going to move to table.
Chair recognizes Mr. Turner to close on his amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I'll be brief in closing. Let me just quote something for you. This is from the Governor of Ohio, John Kasich. He said the most important thing for his legislature to think about: put yourself in somebody else's shoes. Put yourself in the shoes of a mother and a father of an adult child that is struggling. Walk in someone else's moccasins. Understand that poverty is real. And I would simply ask that we think about the millions of Texans in our state who do not have access to affordable health care, and the idea of getting sick or getting into an accident, having an injury, can mean the difference between hanging on like they are today and financial ruin. And that's what this amendment is about, simply to give our state the flexibility to begin drawing down those federal funds. I would ask you to vote no on the motion to table.
Mr. Turner offers up an amendment. Ms. Davis moves to table. The question's on the motion to table. Members, this is a record vote. Clerk will ring the bell. Show Mr. Turner voting no, Ms. Davis voting aye, Mr. Coleman voting no. They have all voted. Being 90 ayes, 55 nays, the motion to table prevails.